That means I
All right, here's my audience. Mom, stepdad, daughter, wife, nephew. Strictly speaking, they're all adults, by age anyway. Anyway, we'll be talking about Christians voting and voting biblically today. I'll start by giving a quote. I don't know who said it. I heard it from our pastor. Um, just because you don't want the responsibility God gave you doesn't mean you're not responsible. And that encompasses voting as Christians here. Voting in this country is a right and a responsibility of everyone that has the ability in this country. Um, so when I go to church, we spend a lot of, I talk to a lot of Christian people, and they spend a lot of time complaining about, the liberal agenda, abortion, government overreach, taxation, and just some of the terrible things that have really come to pass even here in this state. I mean, I actually considered moving from this state because I was tired of, being ran by liberals. And I came to the conclusion that it's not the liberals that are the problem, it's the Christians that are not voting. So just to put this into perspective, in the United States population, everything here is taken from the last election, 2016. So at 2016, the population was approximately 325 million people. Of that, Politico says 200 million people were registered to vote. And according to Gallup, in 2015, 75% of Americans claim to be Christians. And that's 75% of voting Americans. So that's 150 million people. And that study was done by interviewing 174,000 people. Okay, so even though that percentage is way down, it was as much as 90% in the 50s and 80% as early as 2008 when President Obama was elected. 75% is still a significant block, and according even to other sources, the evangelical Christians in this country are still a force to be reckoned with. Even the liberal news media points that out pretty regularly. So of that, only 60% participate in presidential elections. And that's been pretty consistent over the last several elections. So we're looking at approximately 30 to 40 million Christians, people professing to be Christians, that aren't voting. If these people were voting, Roe v. Wade would be a thing of the past. If they were voting and voting biblically, we're not talking about just voting their conscience. I don't care what anyone thinks personally. I care what the Bible says and how we should handle things, and that's how you should be voting. So, therein lies the problem. We need to get out the vote as Christians, activists. Get out the vote and be encouraging our fellow Christians to vote and vote biblically. Finding that information out, how you should vote biblically, is not even difficult. I researched it. There's all kinds of websites or whatever. It's, for Christians, ChristianJournal.com, things like that tells you how you should be voting biblically. So let's just go to Oregon. In Oregon, our population is about 4 million people. Of that, approximately 2.6 million are registered voters. In our last election, just over 2 million voted. 69% of Oregonians as of 2009 identified as Christians, which is about 1.8 million of those votes. According to the Secretary of State's office, 80% of our voting population participated in the last election, which is a little over 2 million, like I just said. If the Christians in this state had voted the way they should have biblically, we would not be a blue state constantly. Donald Trump won the evangelical Christian vote in this country overwhelmingly. But our state still voted for Hillary Clinton. Our state still voted Kate Brown in. while I don't have anything personally against her, she symbolizes liberalism and everything that is anti-biblical. You know, our state voted 56% of our people in our state voted to pass recreational marijuana. 51% voted to pass assisted suicide. This is very narrow margins. If the Christian people had simply voted biblically, would not be the case in this state. Here's another perfect example. Senator Ron Wyden is not a resident of this state. He owns a place here, but it's been common knowledge that he lives in New York. Yet the people in this state, non-Christians, or people not voting biblically, are still voting him in as their senator. This is it's against the law, and no one is doing anything about it. We're not holding anyone accountable. Everybody complains about term limits for senators, but last election cycle we sent 98% of the House and Senate back to work of the same people. 98% of incumbents were reelected, all because we're not holding them accountable and voting biblically. I'll put something else into perspective. Approximately, the statistics vary on this just a little bit, but over 1 million soldiers have died in every war from the American Revolution till now, securing your right to vote. When you don't vote, when you don't hold these people accountable, when you let the government run amok because you're not voicing your right to vote, all you're doing is spitting on their grave. And it's an insult. And Christians should be ashamed of how this country is turning out, because this country was was ordained by God. I believe was ordained by God. A much bigger force. We went up against much bigger force and won. But I just want to reiterate that just because you don't want the responsibility God gave you, it doesn't mean you're not responsible, and He will hold you responsible. Thank you.